Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Soul and Screen. In this particular video, I will be doing a review on Tyler Perry's Sista's Season 10, Episode number 1, titled Next of Kin. Let's just get into it. So, last season, right, we left off where basically Karen and Aaron and Baby Faith were moving to Seattle. God bless, good riddance, all that good stuff in Tiffany's opinion. And then, of course, Sabrina was in a car accident, a really bad car accident, and Andi his car got blew up, and Zac and Fatima were having everybody over to their house for like a cookout. So we pick up in this particular episode where the car is exploding, of course, and they all see the car blow up. And of course, everybody tries to run to it, especially Fatima and Zac. He was in the front first. I love Zac in this because he know his woman, and he was like, no, like telling Fatima, like, no, you cannot go over there. And so Fatima immediately gets on the phone. And as soon as Fatima gets on the phone calling, 911, Danni ends up kind of trying to run, and he ends up having to stop her too. So I really kind of liked seeing how, Zac is who he is. Zac is a protector, you know what I mean? And that's what I do like about his character is, he stand 10 toes down for his. And so definitely he was watching Fatima, because of her, that being his woman and her pregnancy and stuff. But even Andi as a sister to him. And then even Andi's mom tried to run after her, and Mr. Keys kind of steps up and he's like, well, hold on a second. And so he goes a little closer to examine, and he finds Andi on the ground, knocked out. And so he yells to everybody, she's over here, hey. And so everybody runs over to, check on Andi and stuff like that. And so they're all gathering around her and helping her up. And she's, kind of got the wind knocked out of her, so she doesn't remember everything. So she sees her car on fire, and she's like, wait a minute, what happened? And they all kind of you don't remember what happened. And so she's like, no, I, got a text, and next thing I know, I woke up and I'm on the ground. And so, they're all just checking in on her. And Rich, funny, his little tail comes running with a bat, and they like, Rich, what you gonna do with a bat? And he was like, listen, I just heard this loud noise and just came running and stuff. And so, he ends up asking Zac, do you have a fire extinguisher? And so Zac tells him it's in the kitchen. So he leaves to go get it. And they're still just asking Andi questions, and stuff like that. But it was one of the funny things that I don't know if anybody caught this was when they were all kind of getting ready to leave, Maurice was like, I knew I shouldn't have came or something like that. I don't even F with Karen like that anyway. It was hilarious. I fell out because that was a good comedy strip that he does, because sometimes, and this is just my opinion, they can get a little over the top with Maurice's comedy, and his humor and stuff like that. I absolutely believe in the inserts of, some comic relief in between a lot of the drama. And for him and Pam, that's who they seem to be. And even them bringing in Paige periodically, with Maurice and stuff like that, that's very useful. But sometimes it can be over the top. So in my opinion. Anyway, so as they all kind of continue checking in on Andi, you fast forward to the other side of town, and they actually are at the hospital, and you can see the doctors and nurses gathered around supposedly Sabrina. They never show her face because, again, in this season, Novi, who plays Sabrina, and Karen Obsidian have been confirmed to not be in this season. But with Novi's character, looks like they're gonna most likely make her pass away. We still haven't had that confirmed yet, but this accident was supposedly really bad, and they made sure that they referenced, had the doctors and even the cop kind of reference at a certain point that it didn't look good for her. So anyway, you fast forward back to the other side of town, which, they're back at Zac and Fatima's, checking in on Andi. The ambulance and stuff is there, and they're just asking her, telling her, does she want to go to the hospital? And she's like, no, I don't really want to go to the hospital. And so you see the police talking to Fatima, and just everybody's just kind of in a different kind of corner having conversations, and Zac and Mr. Keys and and Rich are like off to the side, and Mr. Keys kind of is like, this kind of seems fishy. It don't look like I didn't smell nothing coming up from the, from the car. So it don't seem like it's mechanical. It seemed like somebody like did this. And Zac is like, yeah, I'm with you. And so, they all kind of just sitting there like, wow. And like, Rich is like, well, it could have been because of the barbecue. Maybe we didn't smell it. And they just like, we don't know. It don't really seem like it, but, got you. And so Rich kind of pulls off to the side and eventually calls Sabrina to tell her what was going on, because remember, she has not made it to the cookout and nobody knows why as of yet. So he calls her. While he's calling her, again, you go back over to, and they have this little moment with Pam and Maurice and Dylan, I believe his name is, and they're talking and just kind of just talking off the side and everything. And I'm gonna be really honest, I won't be spending too much time on them. I do appreciate that they're trying to get Maurice into a relationship and they're trying to engraft Pam and Maurice, the relationship, because, they are getting ready to open up and go into this business together, even with Danni. But, and I think, Courtney is, he got to do what he got to do, but I just don't think that the writers of last season left him much choice. So he kind of has to make it, kind of push it a little sooner instead of making it seem like organic and stuff, because, at one point, they all kind of get around Danni and start talking to Danni. And so, she's like asking, Danni's asking all of them, like, what y'all about to do and stuff like that, which that's not really completely like a bad thing. It's just that, again, they are just now really liking each other. Like Danni and Pam, if you recall, back in season 4, kind of had little words back and forth. So they wasn't like super tight. And then Danni and Maurice have always kind of clashed. So the fact that they are now having them go into business with each other, again, is something I think that Courtney was dropped in his lap, and now he has to try to make it work. And so he's doing that best that he can with it. And so, they're all talking, and, so Danny's like, got you, talking to them, and they, I think Maurice and Dylan and Pam at one point, like the funny part about this whole part was like after the card blew up and everything, everybody's still hungry. So, so they talk about going to make a plate so that they can leave. And then, they kind of go in, I think, at one point, but Fatima at one point, after she finishes talking to the cops and goes over to, sit with Zac and everything. And the cop tells her pretty much what Mr. Keys and Zac thought, which was that he does not think that it's a mechanical issue. He thinks that someone, rigged, blew Andi's car up, basically. And so, after a point, she ends up kind of saying like, Fatima's like, I'm hungry. You guys want to, go in. So they go in and they get them something to eat. And, Fatima's, she's hungry. She's pregnant for sure. So, they get into the house and Andi's sitting at the table and Zac is bringing in, Fatima's plate and stuff like that. And so she's like, oh, cool. Like she pumped. And he's like, what? And she's like, Zac, give me my plate, because he playing games with her. And he's like, you ain't gonna even say thank you or nothing. And she was like, I'll thank the person who seasoned the food, which was me. So he was like, wow. So he's just gonna take all the credit. And she was like, all right, it was a team effort. Now, while she's doing all this conversation with Zac, Andi is sitting at the table in front of her food, but she's in shock, and she's having these moments of flashbacks of seeing her car explode, and her mom is trying to get her attention and stuff. And Fatima kind of makes a reference where it's like, just kind of in the aftermath of everything, it really makes you think about making sure you basically make the most of every day, kind of with your loved ones. And this is me paraphrasing, of course, but, she was like, her mom was like, yeah, tell me about it. And so Fatima, before she like starts eating, she's like, yeah, with that being said, like, Mr. Keys, is there anything that you want to tell Zac? And so Zac looking at Fatima, like, and Mr. Keys is like, no, like, I don't think so. And so she's like, okay. And so Zac and Mr. Keys look at each other, and Mr. Keys is kind of like, I don't know. And so Fatima, she goes on about eating her food and stuff like that. And then Zac kind of comes over to the table and he's like, making references to Fatima's eating. So first of all, she's eating and he come over to the table and he's staring at her and she's like, dang, Zac, like what? And he's like, nothing. I'm just checking and making sure you good. She's like, yeah, I'm hungry. And he was like, I see that. And she was like, whatever. And he was like, you see that? How you going at that chicken bone? And she looks at him because she know he about to go there. And so he was like, I want you to have that same energy later on. And she looked at him. She's like, Zac, and she kind of like tilts her head towards Andy's mom, who's at the table, like, does she like sitting right here? And he's like, please, I'm pretty sure she had ate some chicken back in her day and stuff like that. And let me just say this. Zac is out of line for that. But here's the thing. Zac didn't grow up with a nurturing mother to the point where he learned, respectful conversations to have in front of his mom. Now, with that also being said, I do know boy moms have different relationships and with their moms and stuff. And so, certain conversations are not off limits and stuff like that. But I say that to say that Zac did not grow up learning boundaries and what conversations to have and what's respectful and not. And I'll get into that even more when we go into Fatima season 2, because it also shows that, certain thought patterns and stuff that Zac thinks that, like, even with Fatima having the relationship that she has with her parents, there's a certain level of respect that you have. And that you continue and carry on to your adulthood that Zac just doesn't know about. So while I'm grown and while Fatima is an adult and they are living with each other and they're engaged and everything, you basically don't have a conversation about your woman giving you a BJ in front of somebody who's old enough to be your mom. Like, that's just something that Zac just doesn't get in. Anyway, so that was a little interesting, but at the same time, when I saw it, I was like, what is his problem? And I thought about it. And so I honestly don't think that was out of bounds for his character. I think he didn't grow up parented. So he does not know those conversations to have. And so anyway, fast forward into everything a little bit more, Mr. Keys at some point comes up to, them and kind of was like talking. No, I'm sorry. Andy's mom was like, I'm going to get you home. And so that, and just kind of get you situated and stuff. And so Andy's like, I don't have a car. How are we going to get home? And so Fatima was like, oh, well, Andy, I'll get online and get you a car and rent you a car and stuff like that. And so she was like, thank you, Fatima. And she goes, I don't know how I would, just make it without you. And Fatima kind of just tells her, let's just, basically pray that you don't have to. And so Mr. Keys comes over and he's like, well, I can take you guys home. And so, they go, thank you. And so this whole time, like, if you kind of notice, like, Danni and Rich are both in the background, but neither one of them are talking to each other because, one, they both got beef with each other for kind of the same reason, if you think about it, because Rich is, Danni is mad and not talking to Rich because of the Penelope and him sleeping together, and it made Sabrina mad, right? And she just didn't finish the conversation with Sabrina to find out anything else. She just knows that Sabrina was thinking of giving Rich another chance, and that's pretty much all she knows. But she's still mad, because of what he did with Penelope. Now, Rich, on the other hand, is feeling some type of way about, Danni, because at this point, he knows that Danni slept with the cop because Tony untold him, because that's his boy. So it's so funny because they are, like, not speaking to each other or anything like that. But anyway, the conversation in front of them while they're in the background in the kitchen sitting and stuff Fatima is like asking Andy, like, kind of just questions about, the explosion and stuff. And Andi ends up bringing up the fact that, Dr. Cruz did kind of say that he, that he was, he was really upset about everything. And she started basically saying, that it could have been him. And so, Fatima kind of was like, well, we all kind of said something to him, with the whole Karen thing, the way that he treated Karen and stuff. And so, that's kind of when Danni kind of chimed in and was like, yeah, like, I read him his rights too, basically. And so anyway, basically they go ahead and they end up leaving. And, it's like they just kind of say by each other. And I'm going to insert little pieces of Maurice in them, but I'm not going to do a whole conversation on them or anything like that. So you get into it a little bit more. Maurice and Dylan end up, like, they were in a car having a conversation, and they both are just talking. And, Maurice kind of mentions that this is not like Sabrina to be MIA and not answering her phone and everything, and she's not answering her phone. So they ended up going over to her house. She wasn't there, and so they end up going to the hospital to check and see if she's there, because again, she's still not answering her phone. She's not at her house. And so they decided to go to the hospital to see if the hospital had a patient, and so the nurse basically tells them that I can't release that information to you. And so they're like, well, how do you expect us to find, our loved one and find out if she's here or nothing? So the lady's like, you can file a police report. And then the police walks up, the officer that, Danni was with. And he basically tells Maurice and Dylan that he was there, and, it was a really bad accident, and it doesn't really look good for the person who was in the car accident, and he can't question her or anything like that. And so they are just like, oh, so they just listening, and they like, anyway, let me go ahead and go. So they end up going back to Maurice's house. Back on like the other side of town, while they're doing that, they ended up needing to take the keys to Dylan's sister Paige at the bank, because remember, Sabrina never made it to the bank. And so she's like there, she's calling Maurice, she's like, I need some keys. And so he takes them to her. Back over at Zac and Fatima's house, after everybody leaves, Zac and Fatima are just sitting at the table, and he's just like, dang, babe, like, and he's like, real talk, like, you realize that happened like right when Karen and Aaron and the baby left? And she was like, yeah, I know. And he was like, yeah, I'm glad they was gone, because Karen, she's already been through a whole bunch. And Fatima looked at Zac, and she's like, you have to, babe. And he was like, I know. And he was like, but I was good. He was like, I was just making sure that you two are okay, Fatima and the baby. And before I go on, let me put a pin here. I understand that, just to kind of bring some, bring the stories back in with each other to an extent, and get everybody back on track who may not have watched the season finale, to have the fact that Karen and Aaron and Baby Faith had just pulled off. But I'm gonna be real honest, I don't need them to continue to talk to them about that. I honestly don't feel like Zac should have brought it up, but I'm okay that he did. But I don't really want him, I don't need him talking about Karen and bringing up that kind of stuff to Fatima anymore. I just don't. Like, she gone, and she ain't got nothing to do with neither one of us no more. Like, again, I get it. You don't, neither one of them want to see her hurt or anything like that, or the baby or anything like that. But I just don't really need, and hopefully Courtney doesn't. And I get he might have to do it for these first few episodes with dealing with looks like there's going to be the death of Sabrina. So he might have to reference her a few times, but I really hope that's not going to be throughout season 10, because I don't really need Zac continuing to bring up Karen and stuff like that to Fatima and in conversations. Anyway, to get back on point, so Fatima basically tells Zac, I know, babe. And so she goes, but we're good. And he was like, Fatima, you always talking about you good. And she was like, because I am. And he was like, yeah. He was like, but you don't understand, like, as a man. And so he goes into this. He was like, my job is to protect you and the baby. And she was like, what, Zac, I ain't never asked for no, like, Superman dude. Like, I'm good. I know how to, do what I'm supposed to do. And, I would rather us protect each other, basically. And so he's like, I know. And he's like, how did I get so lucky? And she was like, I don't know. Maybe I was slumming or something. He's like, dang. And she's like, I'm just playing. Just a little jokey joke. And so he's like, yeah. He's like, and so speaking of jokes, he did tell her, like, I think you should go and stay with your mom. and your dad, until this whole thing kind of settles down. And she was like, Zac, I'm not about to leave my house, And he was like, no, Fatima, like, I'm really concerned, because if this stuff with Dr. Cruz, and she was like, Zac, no, listen to me. If Dr. Cruz is as connected as we think he is, then it won't matter where I'm at. Like, if he want to get to me, he gonna get to me. And so then they have their little moment about the jokes and stuff like that. And so he goes, remember that chicken bone we was talking about? And she was like, Zac, how do we get from talking about protecting and serving me to this chicken bone? And he was like, you know what I'm talking about. You know you like it. And she make this little, little cute face that they be doing with each other. And she smiles, and he was like, all right. And so they, she's like, I do. And so they end up running upstairs to, go have sex and stuff like that. And he was like, you want me to get the barbecue sauce? And she was like, nah, boy. And so they go upstairs, and you kind of fast forward to the other side of town, and let's do Andi. So Andi and her mom gets home, and they walk in the house, and something seems off. And so Andi is kind of like, wait, Mom, hold on. And so her mom is like, well, she's like, somebody's here. Let me call the police. And so she calls downstairs to have them call the police. And her mom is like, Andi. And then her sister pops up, and she's just like, hey, sis. And so Andi hangs up the phone, and she's like, Cheyenne, like, what you doing here? And so her mom is like, well, no, Cheyenne goes, well, I told Mom don't say nothing to you because I wanted to surprise you. And so Andi was like, you definitely surprised me. And I'll just finish this with them really quick. So she ends up like in her robe. And so, she's like, are you in my robe? And she was like, yeah, I am. And she was like, take my robe off, basically. And so she took it off, and she's just like, the mom is like, girl, go put some clothes on. And she goes, okay. And, fast forward, she puts some clothes on. Andi, her mom, and Cheyenne, which is her sister now, are sitting at the table. And they're talking, and she's like, so where are you about to stay? To her sister. And her mom was like, she's staying with you. And then like the phone is ringing. Andi's phone is ringing. So she picks up the phone, and she tells her mom that she got to go. And I'll get into that a little bit more in a second. But really quick, let's put a pin here. So am I the only one who thought, or I don't know if it's written or anything like that. I know for a fact that Danni mentioned that she didn't have any siblings when her and Tony were talking. But I honestly thought that one of the connections between Andi, Karen, Sabrina, and Danni were the fact that they were only childs. And so that kind of made them form a sister unit as well, because they didn't really have any siblings, and then they was cool kind of with each other anyway. So they ended up locking in with each other. And I don't know, but I just always thought that was it. We know Karen is her mom's only child, and she didn't really have any kind of relationship with her dad to find out if she do got some siblings or anything, because it's never referenced. So we know Danni and Karen, and then Sabrina, the way that she was talking as well, didn't seem like, she had any siblings to help with her mom, because she always kind of say, I help take care of my mom. She helps with the bills and stuff like that. And I'm not saying that multiple, a kid who has siblings does not take on the full responsibility of financially or caregiving of parents and stuff, because I know that happens. But it just kind of really didn't seem like and Andi, when she was talking to Jordan in season 6 when they went on that trip, that bus ride, like all the conversations made it seem like they were all only children. And so for now to have like the Cheyenne character, like, again, it is what it is. I don't think she ever referenced or actually said it. So I think that gives Courtney some room to go ahead and insert a sibling and things like that. But I think we all thought that they were only children. So anyway, so we'll just leave it there. Going to the other side of town, we get to Danni's house, and Danni is sitting there, and she's still like, like really kind of this whole thing with her and Tony is weighing on her. Now, I will say this. This is what happens like in love relationships, right? And what I mean is you can tell that although Danni and Tony had their problems, Danni was really in love with Tony. I know people wanted Danni to get back with Preston and stuff, and I'm gonna be real honest, I don't think that would have been a good dynamic for them, because they were just in different places. And that's really the reason why I don't think Danni and Tony Tony should be together. But Danni, this is the only one that we've seen who Danni has had relations with, that she's actually really in love with Tony, because this is bothering her. The fact that she hurt him, the fact that she slept with this cop, and she knew, like, when Tony came over and they decided to have a conversation, she invites him in, and he was like, I was coming to check on you. I heard about Andi's, car. And so, she was like, oh, well, thank you. And he was like, yeah, he was like, I'm mad at you. And, I don't get what's going on. And we going through some stuff right now, but I don't want anything to happen to you. And so she was like, thank you for that. And so he comes in and they sit down and they have this conversation. And he's just like, I don't know, like, where we at? Like, like, you betrayed me. And she was like, Tony, I know I did this. And she was like, and I was just drunk. And he was like, really? That's what you about to do? And she goes, no, hear me. She's like, I'm not blaming the drugs and the alcohol. She said, because I honestly do believe that, I don't think alcohol makes you do something that you didn't want to do. You wanted to do it anyway, and it kind of takes away your inhibitions, is basically what she's saying. And to an extent, I agree with that as well. You know what I'm saying? But, so she's like, but I'm just telling you, I need you to forgive me. Like, if we can just both move on, like, you forgive me, I'll forgive you. And he was like, wait a minute, you comparing me borrowing some money to you betraying me and sleeping with somebody else? And she was like, all I'm saying is that we both did wrong. Because here's the other thing. Tony continues to minimize, because you could call it that if you want to. In your mind, you truly may have been borrowing the money. The issue is you didn't ask me. And so since you didn't ask me, can you borrow $10,000 from me? It's stealing. The fact that you paid it back don't mean anything. You stole it, and you got caught, and you had to pay it back. You know what I'm saying? So don't make it seem like, we had this agreement that you fulfilled because you asked me, can you borrow some money? And then I paid you back on time and that kind of stuff. And you don't get to do that. And that's why I don't, with Tony, him minimalizing everything, but wanting Danni to take accountability for her stuff. And that's the stuff that they continue to have issues with in their relationship. And that's one of the reasons that I don't think that they're going to be good for each other right now, because they are both healing and in their journey of healing in different places and spaces. Like, Tony does not want to acknowledge, like, obviously he has a gambling situation. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, Danni is trying to work through her addiction. And I'm not sure, but I've heard on TV and stuff like that, when you just, it's not good for two people who are trying to work on getting addictions in order to be with each other. And I don't know if that's true or not. I'm just saying, but she's working on trying to come out of certain addictions that she has with alcohol and her, her substance abuse with the pen and stuff like that. And sound like he got some underlying gambling thing, because you just gambled lost $10,000 in a certain amount of days. That's not just, that's a problem. And then you stole from me. So that's something different. So anyway, I don't think that they need to be together. I think they do need to work on everything. In the midst of them talking, Maurice calls them and basically tells them, because Maurice got a call from Paige at work saying that the cops came and told them that they found Sabrina's business card in the car wreckage, and that she's not doing good, and they needed to get family information and stuff. And so she called Maurice, told Maurice. Maurice then gets off the phone. He calls Andi, and he calls Danni first. Danni and Tony are in talking, and he's like, Tony's like, answer the phone. It's probably that dude. And she was like, it ain't even that serious. And so he's like, no, I want to see if it's him. She was like, it's not like that. And so she picks up the phone, and she's like, what's up, Maurice? And so Maurice tells her, and she just gets up, and he's like, Danni, what's the matter? And she was like, it's Sabrina. So she goes and she, gets her, because she looks like she has her hair done, like she just got it washed or something like that. And turns out, of course, for everybody kind of said something that she ended, she ends up with a different hairstyle kind of the same day. And, they just don't put no time period in it. But it's possible for you to take your braids down and then, put a wig on really quick, too. So, you know what I'm saying? But anyway. So they all end up getting to the hospital. First, Danni gets there. She walks in and she sees Maurice, and he's sitting there, and she's like, Maurice, what's going on? And so Maurice, she finally gets him to tell her that Sabrina was in a really bad accident and she's in a coma. So she's sitting down, and just like I said, in one of my other shorter videos, that she was definitely going to have some problems with this, right? And that's the first thing that she said. I hung up on her. And so she's talking to her. Tony comes and sit next to her, and he's like, you can't, don't dwell on that. And then Andi walks in, and Andi is like, what's going on, Maurice and Danni? And so Danni tells Andi. Here's the part that got me with this part. Danni is telling Andi what happened to Sabrina, and while she's telling her, Dr. Vaughn walks up, and Andi just is like, he's like, hey, what's going on? And she turns around and she just throws herself around him and hugs him as if they didn't just have like this major argument where she, because she was just told, remember, that he was a part of Dr. Cruz's kind of situation with hurting women, and she never gave him an extra time to explain. So for her to be diving in his arms like she needs him to console her, nah, boo. And I was just like, and that was kind of weird to me. Anyway, while she's hugging him, Zac and Fatima end up walking up, and Rich is kind of like, not Rich, but Tony had walked away and was like, let me call and tell Rich what's going on. And Zac and Fatima walk up, and they're getting the news and everything. And so Danni, she's still kind of like, I can't believe it. It's like my last conversation with her. And so, it was me hanging up on her and stuff. And so, Zac and Fatima are both telling her, like, Danni, don't think like that. Like, we got to send positive thoughts and prayers to her. Like, we not about to talk like this is over. And so Zac is like, yeah, like, we still got to stay hopeful and stuff. Fatima's right. And so they all kind of like exhale a little bit, and then you hear over the intercom at the hospital, code blue to ICU, and see the doctors all run towards that direction, and that's when Maurice goes, like, that's where oh my goodness, that's where Sabrina is, and then they all kind of look, and that's pretty much where the episode ends. Well, it is where the episode ends, excuse me. So, anyway, what do you guys think? I thought for a first episode of season 10, knowing what Courtney had to fix, I thought it was a good episode. I feel like he tried to, tie up a couple of loose ends, and we'll see. I'm pretty sure we'll see that. Maybe the next 2 episodes, see more of that, and then we'll kind of move on through things. But we'll see the pace that he the pace that he decides to go in and stuff like that. But I thought overall it was a really decent, a good, first episode of the season, where he did try to bring some conversation and resolutions to stuff instead of letting it hang out for a couple of days, because he could have drew out that Tony and Andi conversation, and I'm glad he didn't. I thought it was funny that Maurice kind of mentioned that he didn't even really get along with Karen like that. So why he there? Because he could have got hurt and stuff. Like, those comical moments, when they happen naturally and don't seem so forced, I think they come across way better with the Maurice character. I don't like his the comedy that seems over the top, or too much, and that's just in my opinion. But I like the natural flow of comedy and stuff like that. And the whole Pam thing, that was too much when she was talking to him and Maurice. Like, got it. They in a relationship. You don't gotta like keep. You like meat and all. Like, it's just too much, Pam. Like, y'all grown. Y'all not kids. So everybody knows about adult sex and and stuff that people do. So just let's not make this that big of a deal, or try to make it force it anyway. And I understand, I feel like Courtney is placed in a position, like I said, where he has to do a lot of tying of loose ends and connecting things, and that's the way that he's going to have to do it in order to get some type to start forming and allowing us to see the relationship between Andi, Danni, and I'm sorry, not Andi, Danni, Pam, and Maurice form to the point where they are going to start a business, because these are 3 people who don't know enough about each other. They don't know anything about each other. They don't barely, 2 of them don't really like Danni don't really get along with neither one of them. And Maurice and Pam just met at Sabrina's putting together Karen's baby shower in season 7. So that's really quick, which was just a matter of days to try to form a business partnership with, you know what I'm saying? So I think Courtney, he had to do what he had to do to try to formulate the relationship. And so anyway, pretty good episode. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into the conversation. You guys let me know what you thought about the episode. And I'm looking forward to the next episode and to see what happens. It was really good to see a new beginning, the way, of course, with the new characters and stuff, they were going to have to do a new intro. And it was nice. Oh, let me say this. So, no, I'll go ahead. I'll do probably a short on this. But anyway, let's get into the conversation. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.